After going to war with Billy Starks, Red Velvet had secured the ROH Women's TV title. It's definitely time to stir it up. I'm going to talk about it, as well as other Black Gold that happened this past weekend. You are now tuned into WrstlXtra.
Yo, this is a WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle. Always joined by my trios team, the Real House of Black, Mex, the WrestleManiac, if you will, Yeet, and of course, say his name and he will appear, the omnipresent Gerard Bonner. Red Velvet has become the new ROH television champion, as well as Lee Moriarty becoming the ROH pure champion just this past weekend on Ring of Honor, Death Before Dishonor. A crazy evening. Great things, amazing matches. Gerard, just give me your thoughts on the show in general. And of course, the big title wins that have just been mentioned.
So definitely a big show for Ring of Honor. It's wild because in this wrestling culture where, you know, you've got the WWE who has a PLE almost every month, and AEW who is got a schedule where it's almost every month. It's wild to see a company like Ring of Honor only have 3 pay-per-views a year. And this one is number 2. And so it certainly made this something that you'll want to pay attention to. And Ring of Honor definitely puts on big for their pay-per-view situation. So Death Before Dishonor happening there right outside of Dallas in Arlington, Texas. And a big show for them, for sure. Very, very big show. The culmination of a lot of feuds and things of that nature. One of those feuds being the feud between Red Velvet and Billy Starks over the World Television Championship. And shout out to Red Velvet, who has been working so hard in that AEW Ring of Honor universe and has not had a lot of shine as perhaps she should have. You know, she was involved in a lot of major moments. If you think about it, the very first match that Jade Cargill had in AEW was a tag match where Red Velvet was on the other side of the ring. She's been steady Eddie. She has been kind of that person that you can depend on. She's dealt with injury and the like. And so it's great to see Red Velvet finally come away with a championship, becoming only the second world television champion on the women's side, the first Afro-Latina to do so. Very, very excited for Red Velvet, who worked hard, who earned this victory, and very, very excited for her.
You know, as you mentioned, you know, she's been around for a while. She was there when Jade Cargill first turned up in AEW. She's been doing her thing even before that. And I remember us talking about this, the tournament to crown the first ever ROH Women's TV champion. You know, we were talking about Queen Aminata looking like a favorite, Red Velvet being, a possibility to win it. You know, and I'm not surprised. We always said that either one was a champion. Mex, do you feel as though this has come at the right time? Are you surprised it's happened so quickly with Billy Starks' reign not lasting that long?
I think what's been more surprising is that Billy Starks apparently she didn't defend that title until that night. So it's a bit of a dropped opportunity, I guess, to really give her some momentum in her run. And obviously we hope that's not the same for Red Velvet. But I'm expecting it. Like, if we look at that ROH women's roster, Red Velvet is a senior statesman, if you like, of that roster. You know, she really should be kind of taking these opportunities. So it's good to see. I think obviously the pairing, I've got some words about the pairing with Queen Aminata and just how that whole thing has happened over the last few months. But I'm definitely happy to see that Red Velvet, you know, there's no time like the present in it. It's one of them ones, and I think it's just good to see that finally they've kind of given her the ball, and let's see how she can run with it.
You know, you mentioned the pairing. What are your thoughts in terms of this pairing? Because we saw Aminata challenge Athena. You know, we had this whole thing with Athena faking an injury, and she's been the champion for however many, you know, 500 plus days and whatnot.
Close to 600 now. Yeah.
Yes, almost 600 now. Do you feel as though there may have been a missed opportunity there? Do you think it's anything to do with the pairing? How's your mind thinking when it comes to this whole thing?
I don't think that necessarily Aminata should have won here. I definitely think back, what was it, WrestleMania weekend, she should have won the TV title. That's where I think she should have won. The pairing with Red Velvet, this is not representative of WrstlXtra. This is representative of next WrestleMania.
Oh boy.
Yeah?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
And it's nothing crazy that I'm gonna say. I just think how they are both kind of put out there were very different. Red Velvet, we've seen her in very different iterations with different people, often kind of doing enhancement talent level stuff, rightly or wrongly, but that's where she's kind of been pictured. From the moment you guys signed officially Queen Aminata, you really kind of put her on a pedestal sort of thing. Gave her the run through the ROH women's TV tournament, didn't win the final. And then for me, she kind of alters the character, which I don't think is anything wrong with that, because I think it's kind of good to have a well-rounded facet of character, if you see what I mean, kind of do a bit of everything. But the pairing with Red Velvet almost made her not seem, I guess, so serious as I feel like she was. She was very obviously she's Queen Aminata. She was very regal. The way she carried herself was of a certain caliber, and I feel like they've lost an element of that. Not all of it, but an element of that since the pairing with Red Velvet. It's almost like, I was going to make a rant about this as well. Lyra Valkyria on WWE being kind of now paired with what are they called? The party girls. I don't know what they call them.
Yeah.
And I just feel like Lyra came in the door, like boom, you put her in certain positions, and it's a similar kind of thing. Like, yes, it's good because she's on TV still, but it's taking the shine off of what they were doing, if you like. And I feel that's kind of like, I will just straight up say this. I absolutely hate seeing Red Velvet and Queen Aminata just dance around on Instagram. I can't stand it. It doesn't tickle my fancy. It's not for me. And that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves with Red Velvet. Like, I feel like she's got really some good talent in the ring. Like, why are you dancing? Till this moment, you should be so angry. People have come in, they've surpassed you. You know, you are one of the early AEW people. Why are we so happy outside of AEW? You should be boiling of rage, and not necessarily saying heel turn, but I just feel like there's nothing to be happy about. But yeah, so for me, that's why I told you these are my views, not WrstlXtra, please. No one should get in trouble. But yeah, I just feel like the pairing has kind of not necessarily hasn't really benefited Aminata, especially. I feel like Red Velvet it's good that she's got to this point. Like I said, we ideally would have liked to see her get to this point earlier. But yeah, the pairing for me, I've still got some time to kind of warm up to it, I guess.
I think the Lyra Valkyria comparison is, works very well in the sense where I don't think it has necessarily hindered their come up or the way they're used. As you said, they're on TV a lot more. They're still in, quite important stories and feuds and stuff like that. But I guess for me, if I look at it, it's almost like it didn't need to happen. It wasn't like, either Queen Aminata or Valkyria were struggling in terms of, getting over with the fans and all that kind of thing. So it's almost like, yeah, it didn't need to happen. It's not hindered them, but it didn't need to happen. Like, why make that decision? Gerard, what are your thoughts in terms of this pairing? You know, how it's gone, and in more so terms for Aminata, more than I guess for Red Velvet.
So it's interesting. I mean, I definitely, in watching Raw last night, felt like, why is Lyra Valkyria out here dancing with the party girls? I felt like that in that regard. Absolutely. I haven't had those feelings relative to Red Velvet and Queen Aminata. And I think part of the reason why is the story has been built in such a way when it comes to Athena and Billy Starks, as though they always have an advantage over their opponents. They don't win clean. There's going to be interference. And so I looked at Red Velvet and Aminata as two people who had a common goal. That goal is to dethrone Billy Starks and Athena. And so that's kind of what started their pairing, because remember, they battled in the semifinals of the World TV Title tournament. So there's respect that's built there. I've been excited to see that pairing. I think the issue has come in terms of how Ring of Honor has told the story. I think they took way too long with this story. If you've watched Ring of Honor television, this story has gone on since WrestleMania weekend. And if you think about how long that is, that's almost 4 months. And it was literally, there were not a lot of fast moving parts here in this. So to me, that was kind of the issue. It felt like it was drawn on a bit too long. I actually thought that both Aminata and Red Velvet would walk away with championships this weekend. So I'm intrigued to see what this does for Aminata right now. You know, because I felt like if there's going to be anybody who dethrones Athena, it would be her. So who else in Ring of Honor could be the one to do it? I have absolutely no idea. And I don't know what they could be saving this for. I hope not for Final Battle, because that's not until the end of the year. We definitely don't need this to go on that long. If it happens on AEW television, I don't think it hits the same. You know, I don't think that they're going to do this on a stage like All In. So I don't know where this happens for Aminata, because to me, if you're going to put the rocket ship on Aminata, and it feels like they have been ready to do that from the second they signed her, the only person for her to beat really is Athena at this point. And that's where you really put the rocket ship on her and say she's the one. So I'm very curious in terms of what happens now in that regard, and what happens for Aminata from here on out.
I've got a point and then a question. I'm going to go back to you, Gerard. The point I was going to make is, you know, again, the comparison of Valkyria, Aminata. You know, you mentioned that, you know, Aminata and Velvet have come together because of a common goal. And I think it's kind of similar with Valkyria in a sense where we're kind of seeing this whole thing of trios of women in WWE. And it's almost like, you know, Valkyria with Kaden and Katana kind of happened just because of that. Just to put her with two other women, just to put those two with one other person to create these trios. Because, you know, we've seen Sonya, Shayna, and Zoe together. We see Damage Controller back. You know, we're seeing all these things. And so I think it's that. Again, it's still kind of like, but why? But I guess that's a way to make sense of it. Going to the question I was going to ask, with ROH only having 3 PLEs or big events throughout the year, do you now feel as though the only time, you know, Athena's going to have this title now until the end of the year? Because if it's not, you know, if it doesn't hit the same way on TV or on ROH TV, especially with it not being on a channel, it being held on YouTube and all the rest of it, ROH talent not ever really being shown in the best way on AEW. We'll get back to that as well when it comes to Lee Moriarty. Let's not go there just yet. You know, do we feel as though it's going to take until December for Athena to lose, and is that a problem?
So I think, and there was something that was said during the Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view that made me go, They talked about how she is the second longest reigning champion of any gender in Ring of Honor. Second to only, of course, Samoa Joe. So it made me wonder if she's going to beat that record. If this goes out to December, she absolutely will. Part of the problem they have right now, like I said, is outside of Aminata, who do you have as a viable challenger? And so that's a bit concerning. I don't have a problem with Athena holding the title that long. We just need a real competitor to make these matches mean something. And that's my primary concern.
Nick, what are your thoughts in terms of, is there anyone that can be built to kind of challenge Athena?
The one person that just came into my head, and that would be to support what's happening on Dynamite, not necessarily to support what's happening on Ring of Honor, is Camille. And I guess we'll get to the whole Camille conversation shortly. But yeah, really and truly, you're looking at someone like Aminata, that's the story is there that she has to overcome Athena, or someone that is literally, a monster that will just come and take the title away, and we can all believe it first time round, like Camille. So I think there could be something with the Camille stuff, especially if, depending how long Mercedes is going to hold her titles, she wants her apprentice to maybe be a CEO in their own right, and that can be a title they take, and maybe getting Mercedes to go on Ring of Honor, get some eyes over there, especially if they are sorting out some type of TV deal in some capacity. Yeah, it's she's an outside name for me, but it's got to be Aminata, and that's the right name. Not doing the TV title back at WrestleMania weekend was a shock. I was shocked. I was in attendance, and I remember my jaw being on the ground, sort of thing. And I then thought, okay, like I said, I've not been too keen on this partnership, but I have seen the benefits of what it's done for Queen Aminata and building her more towards this story of the top title, which is always nice. It's got to be her as the first pick. Yeah, December feels like a very long time, but God forbid there's any injury to Athena. That's what we're waiting for at this point. It's going to be December.
There is one scenario that I just thought of that could work, and that is if they do this on the 0 hour of All In. If you remember last year, they did the Ring of Honor tag titles. Now, granted, it was MJF and Adam Cole, and they were in the main event, and there was story there, but it was still a Ring of Honor presence for their tag team titles. So you could set this up where you have Aminata and Athena in 0 hour, because I don't think they'll put it on the main show. Not that those two as competitors aren't worthy, but they haven't built Ring of Honor up in a way where you could say, hey, the people in England want to see it, but they could use that match as a draw for people to go, this is the kind of action that you'll see here tonight. And then let Aminata win the title in front of 60,000 people, which that's the only other big thing left to happen for Ring of Honor, because there's nowhere else on the calendar except Final Battle. And yeah, so that's the only other scenario I could potentially see a title change happening right now. That would make sense.
Yeah.
I genuinely, I understand the optics and the stadium and this, that, and the other. I don't know if people in attendance would care. Now, granted, the match itself can make people invested.
Sure.
But I don't even know if that's say a prize for Athena for being such a brilliant champion, a fantastic platform for Aminata to win the title. I think maybe more so for me personally, give them the main event of Death Before Dishonor. If you're gonna do it, I think that should be, do it in their domain, which is Ring of Honor on their show. I understand, you completely, the pre-show thing, and the pre-show is very much getting Adam Cole and MJF there was, let's get these 70,000 people through the door ASAP sort of thing. So people want to see the pre-show and let's get them on it. I just don't think these guys would have that kind of pull with this crowd, especially, and you know, Ring of Honor and stuff like that. Like, but if you're gonna do it, I say do it big for Ring of Honor in the main event of the show.
I mean, you've got from Death Before Dishonor, you had that crazy match between Diamante and
Layla Hirsch.
Layla Hirsch as well. You know, they could be challengers in the near future for Athena. I believe they would be credible. Again, I don't think we'd get to a point where we think Athena could lose to either of them. But I think it'd still be credible enough for us to say, okay, you know, this title run for Athena is still means something, still relevant, still, you know, keeps our eyes fixed on what Athena does. I think there's that could possibly be in between. But again, yeah, I believe if there's going to be any title change or with Athena losing that title, it would have to be at Death Before Dishonor. The All-In scenario is a possibility. I think that's a decent way to do it earlier. But anything apart from that, it would feel completely pointless. But the difficult part is, you know, still making us feel as though this run for Athena, especially if it lasts till December, right, is going to be very difficult to kind of, you know, keep us interested for that long. And herein lies the issue again, as we seem to come to every time we mention Ring of Honor, is how it is portrayed in AEW in general. But we saw Lee Moriarty become the new ROH Pure Champion. Great match with Wheeler Yuta. Very clever way of him winning. You know, the rope break thing. Both of them used up their 3 rope breaks each. And then Moriarty decided to kind of, you know, use that to his advantage in defeating Wheeler Yuta. The difficulty and the negative that came was literally days later when Moriarty lost. And as much as it was in a multi-person match, unfortunately, I think the asterisk on the loss was to a team that involved the person that he beat a few days ago in, you know, the Blackpool Combat Club Wheeler Yuta. Mex, how are we still in this space where champions are being made but then are losing matches within days of them winning matches? What is going on?
Sorry, was this on Collision?
It was.
Yeah.
It was literally the next day in the same building.
So I've just been so busy this weekend. I'll literally have Collision to watch tonight. And you've told me, and I'm actually not going to watch Collision now because that is extremely frustrating to hear. Like that doesn't make sense. Like, and yes, it's in a different domain. It's not a one-on-one match, but you know, you've done so well to get us to this point, sort of thing. And yeah, to just kind of throw it away. Was there any stakes in the match, or is it just STP versus Blackpool Combat Club?
Well, if there's any consolation, Shane Taylor was somehow injured Friday night. And so Brian Cage took his place. So it was Brian Cage and Lee Moriarty against Claudio and Wheeler Yuta. And I believe it was it Yuta that got the pin on Brian Cage? I think it was Yuta.
I'm not even sure.
But yeah, Brian Cage ended up losing that match, getting pinned. Okay. And so, yeah, that's what happened. But there were no stakes like if, you know, Blackpool Combat Club wins, then Yuta gets a rematch or something. It wasn't anything like that.
Yeah.
But it was 24 hours after the title change in the same building.
Yeah, it's an absolute mess. It's a loss. It's silly. Like, why would you do that? Just for the optics? Like, he's now got a loss next to his name. Yes, he wasn't pinned, but it's like, what for? You've literally just crowned him as champion. And it shows a little care that they have in that product. You know, we're here ranting and raving, oh, great, they made him champion. What's next for Lee? They don't care. Like, they don't really care ultimately. And it's unfortunate because we're talking about, you know, I was mentioning about Queen Aminata and the pairing. Obviously, Lee Moriarty is someone that's recently joined STP, you know, in the last 6 months or so, whatever. And for him, it's actually benefited him, I would say, in terms of giving his like character an edge or whatever the case is. And I feel like we saw you know, elements of that play out in the match that he had with Wheeler Yuta.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to go and lose on Collision is I don't know, is very poor. Like, all you should be doing is giving Lee Moriarty, if anything, a singles match. And you know, if he wins a singles match, you can say, oh yeah, you look at the style of wrestling, blah blah blah. You can look forward to that at his reign as a champion, as a pure champion. You know, it's not that hard.
and he almost makes it even worse. So some may argue he didn't get pinned, so it's not that bad. But then, what would be the point in him being involved in the match? You know what I mean? Like, just give him a win, or even if it was, you know, Moriarty that pinned Claudio because Wheeler Yuta did something wrong, or there was or whatever it is, or like you said, Max, you know, just give him a singles win over somebody. It doesn't really matter who it is, just a singles win, just to say, yep, this is our new champion. Have a look at him. Go and watch him on ROH TV. You can find him on Honor Club, blah, 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 all that good stuff. It's a very simple thing. I don't understand that booking. I just don't. I just can't make sense of it. I can't see it. I can't find a positive in it whatsoever.
Yeah, there are a few things in that whole universe that aren't making a lot of sense right now. And I think it's unfortunate. I think that you cannot, considering the relationship between AEW and Ring of Honor, you can't completely treat them like two different universes because they are very much in the same family, and what happens in one space impacts the other. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this also goes along with another very strange booking decision that I'm wondering, did I miss something? Because, you know, 2-3 weeks ago, the 6-man titles, or the trios titles, were unified, and suddenly during Death Before Dishonor, they're saying these teams are fighting for the right to battle for the ROH 6-man tag titles against Undisputed Kingdom. And I'm like, I literally was scratching my head. I was like, what on earth did I miss that suddenly the titles are no longer unified? There wasn't an announcement, there wasn't anything. So yeah, there's just a lot of unusual things that are happening that, you know, just at least make it make sense. Make an announcement, say something. But there weren't even really defenses of the unified 6-man tag titles, not for real. And now here we are. Like, why even unify them? What was the point? That was just a couple of months ago. It doesn't make any.
It's the epitome of, we don't care, you guys aren't watching, so clearly you don't care. So we could do whatever here, basically. That's all they're doing.
It blew me away.
Very, very weird. And there are other things that happened on the show that, you know, doesn't correlate with AEW, ROH, and, you know, and as great as Briscoe, is he? Mark Briscoe is. I think even him beating Roderick Strong was. I only say that based on the fact that he was in the Blood and Guts match, and, you know,
2 nights before,
like almost died, like half the people in the match,
right,
but yet still defeats a fresh Roderick Strong,
and then wrestles the next night on Collision. That man wrestled 3 times this week. Well, let's say this: he's perhaps the only Ring of Honor champion in the history of that company that's actually protected in an AEW world. So
true. At least they're ticking a box that we've been waiting for them to tick. But again, it still doesn't make sense. What is going on?
Doesn't.
Man, it's crazy. It's crazy stuff. Keeping our minds on AEW. We have mentioned her, but let's go into it. Mercedes Moné, of course, is set to face Britt Baker at All in London as well, and has aligned herself with Camille, the former NWA Women's Champion, held the title for a very long. I think it was over 300 days, probably more.
Over 800 days.
Oh, was it? Was it that long?
Yeah, it was like 817 days. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. And Camille comes in, and does her thing. What are we, Gerard? What are we thinking in terms of this pairing? Does this work for Camille? I think visually it's brilliant for Mercedes. It works in terms of what she's trying to do, who she's trying to be at the moment. You know, I think Mex has mentioned it many a time in terms of, you know, her kind of having some kind of allegiance or even joining the Elite. We've kind of seen that play out a little bit in their backstage interactions. So this whole heel thing is working, and Camille, I think, adds very nicely to the visual. But does this work for Camille? As you said, you know, more than 800 days as the NWA Women's Champion, but now coming in as the Diesel to Mercedes is Shawn Michaels.
Yes.
Does it work?
It's probably too soon to tell if it'll work or not, because we've only seen her show up once. I feel like it's kind of an affront to the NWA Women's World Championship and all that Camille did with that. I mean, you know, over 800 days as a women's champion is significant. And I know this is not the NWA of old. I understand that. But I do think, you know, as a former women's world champion, there's at least a degree of respect. Now, perhaps pairing her with Mercedes Moné is that degree of respect, right? Arguably the most recognizable figure, certainly on the mainstream side in AEW, is Mercedes. So you pair her with Mercedes, you introduce Camille to a new audience. I'm interested to see what happens after this. Is this going to be 6 months of her protecting Mercedes before she ever gets in the ring and gets to do something on her own? Does she get an opportunity at Championship Gold? Which championship? Because certainly it doesn't look like it'd be her and Mercedes. And then with the world title being where it is, she wouldn't get a world title shot before Mercedes. So it seems like it would only be possibly the Ring of Honor Championship, if that's even a direction. So I'll be interested to see how they treat Camille. We might forget that before she was the women's champion, she was in that same role for Nick Aldis and for his whole crew over in the NWA. So it's not a role that's unfamiliar to her, and it's not an unfamiliar way to introduce her. So this may not be that bad of a situation. It's just going to take some time to see how this will all play out.
Max, as I mentioned, you know, Mercedes is set to face Britt Baker. We've already seen, you know, the confrontation between them. They had a thing at the San Diego Comic-Con where Tony Khan did his best to try and convince us he was upset and angry, and obviously made the match there and then. Surprise, surprise. Does, you know, how are you seeing this one play out? Is it a Mercedes clean win? Is it obvious Camille's going to get involved for her to win? Do we see Britt Baker winning this championship?
Isn't it funny? Two wrestlers were fighting whilst Tony Khan was sitting at a table. He didn't threat for his life this time round, no?
Wow. While that threat was in the building. How about that?
Yeah.
Well said.
Anyway, I think Camille being paired with Mercedes is smart. I loved the segment on Dynamite when Britt Baker unveiled, and it's almost like a bit of like a cartoon character. She Mercedes Moné ran away with both belts above her head, like running around the ring while Britt was chasing her. So it makes sense now that she's got this level of protection. Yeah, it doesn't, you like Gerard said, it's like she was previously a champion and where she's coming from. But, you know, being paired with, I guess, one of the biggest women in this sport, you know, is probably fairly equivalent to not surpassing what you did in NWA. So with all due respect, it's one of them ones where I'm sure she doesn't mind the position she's going to be on, and she's got to be on TV every week, you know, guaranteed. So I think it's a good place definitely to kind of get in the door, the crowd get to know who she is and what she's about as well. And this is all, you know, part of the good work I'd say that they've been doing in terms of rehabbing the women's division over there and getting more people on screen, giving more people time, things of that nature. I think Dell has said it in the comments here. Big up, Dell. I think we're getting, obviously, we got Britt Baker and Mercedes at All In. A week or two later, we've got All Out. And yeah, maybe we get Jamie Hayter returning so they can do a tag match at All Out is what I probably think we're heading to. Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker versus Camille and Mercedes. But yeah, I think apart from, like we mentioned, the ROH title, I think this is a really good place for her to kind of come in, just get familiar with everything, get familiar with the crowd, and yeah, do some good stuff before, I guess, the eventual split and stuff. We'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I think it's a very, very good pairing. It's a very good decision. Visually, it works so well. It's a great. I think it actually is a great way for Camille to come in. It kind of already, we've already kind of gone to this place where one's going to turn on the other eventually. Whether a title's involved and whatever else, we're going to see someone turn on someone and all the rest of it at some point. So we've already kind of got our heads fixed there, which will be a great thing for Camille. Mercedes is doing great things. And I have to say, it's also a chance for us to say that I think in general, there are still little things, but I think in general, we can see that there has been a bit more attention and love in terms of the women's division on AEW, because even the stuff that, Toni Storm and Mariah May are doing is brilliant stuff. And I think this is definitely up there with that as well. And it is very different to that. So it's nice that there are two different things happening that are kind of, got us excited. So I have to give them props, as hard as it is, and it hurts my heart to say, but, it's Tony and yeah, it's him. So, yeah, there's that. Moving away from AEW, but still talking about people who are moving places. It was very interesting to see MVP show up at Bloodsport. Bloodsport very, very quickly has become the place where the Forbidden Door is carved out, and so many different people walk through that door. I believe I saw a post where it said Bloodsport kind of broken a record where, they said they had people from WWE, NXT, New Japan, TNA, like almost every major company was represented at Bloodsport. But the thing we're coming away with, of course, is MVP coming out and challenging the originator of Bloodsport, Josh Barnett. The most interesting thing for me, we'll talk about, is that Josh Barnett accepted the challenge from MVP. One, MVP kind of made it very obvious he's now leaving WWE. He said, the other company I don't want to name, but I'm not going back. But then Josh Barnett said, this is where the Hurt Business make the most money. And when you come back, I hope that you bring a few people that you know with you. With Shelton Benjamin obviously not being under contract with anyone, MVP clearly leaving WWE, and the possibility still of Bobby Lashley possibly leaving WWE. Gerard, how possible is it for us to see the Hurt Business turn up at a Bloodsport event?
I think in this environment, anything is possible. I certainly wouldn't put it past them. And if those contracts are indeed running out, as MVP has alluded, it could be really interesting. And what makes it even more interesting in that Bloodsport environment is it really digs deep into what these guys are naturally skilled to do. Whether it is Shelton Benjamin as an amateur wrestler, whether it is MVP and his jiu-jitsu background, whether it is Bobby Lashley and his MMA success. Those three guys over in Bloodsport could be a real problem. So I'd be interested to see how comfortable they would be in that environment. But I think it would be an amazing way for them to follow up what they've done in the WWE and to actually somewhat put the band together. And I say somewhat because you still have some pieces over in WWE. But I think that would be very, very interesting. Very interesting.
We saw obviously the first iteration of the Hurt Business before Cedric Alexander was part of the group. Bobby Lashley, MVP, Shelton Benjamin kind of take over the short-lived Raw Underground. at one point, of course. That also having very similar feel to the Bloodsport feel as well, obviously with no ring ropes and kind of just, you know, just slugging it out on the ring mat. Mex, with this possibility, and it is just Bloodsport, so I guess, you know, we're probably not going to get overly excited because we want to see them on a regular TV show and all that kind of stuff. With this possibly happening, do you still think it might be a better idea for Bobby Lashley to do that or to stay within the WWE?
The funniest part is that he could do this in the WWE.
True.
This is true.
True.
He could resign and then say, I want to go do Bloodsport with this. You lot don't want to use the Hurt Business here. Obviously, we can't go out there necessarily and say Hurt Business, but us three together are Hurt Business. So they could do exactly that sort of thing. And I feel like that might be one of the biggest selling points for Bobby Lashley at this point, where he can clearly see, right, I'm not the number one guy in WWE, or they're not going to use me as a number one guy, as a top guy. But at least if I sign some level of high paying contract close to maybe the figure I want, they can use me to kind of help put over younger guys and to put people over in WWE. But I can go out to my previous stomping ground of TNA and do some work over there. I can go and do some GCW stuff. I can go explore Japan, Noah, if I'm sent there. Like, I think that's probably more so the upside of him re-signing at this point, more so than kind of, if he goes out and does it alone, he has to fight battles, which might not be hard fights because obviously he is Bobby Lashley, but you know, the infrastructure is there for WWE to set these things up for you, and like this is your itinerary, turn up here. As opposed to you having to do, like, I listen to a lot of interviews now of Dijak. Obviously, he's left WWE, and he's talking about the slog of having to organize everything yourself.
Right.
His missus at this point he said my missus is my secretary. Like, she's doing all of this stuff for me and just booking me flights and where I need to get to. You know, in the case of he's turning up to places that aren't booking him flights. So yeah, we're living in a world now, in a universe where ultimately all of this can happen, and he could be under WWE contract. So yeah, I mean, I would want to see that 100%. I mean, it might be a bit hokey as to what GCW Bloodsport is, but if they just turned up and like beat up people like they did with Retribution and in Raw Underground, that would be a good sight as well. But yeah, I think definitely those three kind of, even if it's MVP's match, but they turn up as a 3, or Bobby Lashley's having a match, they turn up as a 3, I think could be something very different and unique.
And that's the interesting thing, you know, like you said, you know, you can stay with WWE and still do that. It's interesting to think as well that, you know, MVP still showed up on the contract. Of course, he must have had to ask permission or get the blessing from WWE, Triple H, whoever it is, for that to happen as well. So yeah, that whole thing is very, very interesting. And I think obviously, you know, a year, 2 years ago, this wouldn't have happened. You know, we're now seeing, you know, some, you know, Shayna Baszler has been there like 2 or 3 times now. Charlie Dempsey, you know, the Creed brothers were on there as well. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's something very different. And these are people that, you know, apart from Charlie Dempsey, of course, that are on the main roster of WWE, which makes it even more interesting to see it happening and happening so regularly, almost every time now. Bloodsport has done their thing in the last 6 months. You know, one of them's there. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think it probably would be best for Bobby to kind of negotiate that type of scenario, as opposed to just leave altogether. You know, kind of fend for himself. And as you said, Max, you know, I'm sure it wouldn't be difficult for him to be booked or to get bookings, but it's all the logistics, you know, that comes with it, and having to do it on his own as well. That causes a very different scenario in his mind. Going back a little bit, something that we needed to mention, completely forgot to mention, with ROH. Of course, we saw Caprice Coleman kind of listed as the number 3 color commentator in the world of professional wrestling. Of course, Gerard, I'm gonna come to you because you know this man very personally, works with him very closely, all the rest of it. How does it feel to see Caprice Coleman, a man that's been doing the color commentary thing for a few years now, kind of get that recognition? Number 3, over the likes of a Pat McAfee, who is one of the most popular that there is in the game at the moment. How did it feel to see Caprice Coleman, get listed as number 3 on that PWI list?
It felt amazing. It really did. He sent it to me and I just was over the moon about it. He's a guy who works extremely hard to do the absolute best that he can. He brings such a unique perspective. Obviously, being a former competitor, I think anytime you've been in the ring, you add something different, but he's just a different kind of guy. I mean, he's a guy who can sing, he can rap, he can wrestle, he can manage, he can be commissioner. He can do literally anything when it connects to pro wrestling, and he brings all of that expertise into what he's doing as a color commentator. I think it's important for people to understand that there were names, because I saw some people say, well, why wasn't Michael Cole on the list and things like that. There's kind of 2 sides to the commentary space. There's the play-by-play. They're the people who primarily call your moves. And then there's the color commentary piece where they really add kind of the sauce. They are the seasoning, I think, to what's happening in pro wrestling. So to see him, acknowledged over a Taz, over a Booker T, over a Pat McAfee, says, number 1, that what he's doing is working. For him to be number 3 and behind that beloved Ring of Honor paywall, says that somebody has been paying attention, that it's got to be harder to get recognized when you're behind that paywall on a product that there may not be as many people who can access versus a product that's on cable television or network television on a weekly basis. So shout out to Caprice, man. I honor him. He has been so instrumental in my career. He's given me some incredible opportunities, and working with him, I know how much it matters to him to tell the story, to spend more time putting the people on camera over than putting himself over. And so shout out to him. And I think people need to understand that there are very few African-American pro wrestling commentators in the business, period. So to see 2 of them in the top 10 on this list is extremely significant. And so I honor Booker T. I honor Caprice Coleman. They are doing an amazing, amazing job. And it's just kind of cool to be part of that fraternity, obviously on a different level, but they are nationally and internationally known. And I shout out them and commend them for the incredible job that they're doing. And I can only imagine what's next for Caprice. In the words of Mark Henry on your post, now let's get him paid like that, because he absolutely deserves that and then some.
Of course. And again, it's phenomenal to see the likes of a Mark Henry kind of boost his whole work ethic and everything that he's doing, and his recognition as well. And to think that both Caprice and Booker T, it's not the only thing that they do.
Correct.
Both of them are still very active in terms of getting in the ring every now and again, in terms of training younger stars, developing other talent as well. Caprice, his son recently got involved and became a pro wrestler as well. He's been doing his thing on the indies in North Carolina. And, to see all of that and to then be recognized, as you said, for that to be in ROH behind this paywall, on a show that's not recognized, above guys that we hear and see maybe sometimes 2 to 3 times a week, is phenomenal stuff. And shout out to Caprice for that, definitely. Let's head our way back to WWE. We see SummerSlam. It's SummerSlam week. We're getting ready for SummerSlam. There's not many of our stars involved, but I just want to get.
Not many. There's none.
There's none. I mean, Jaden Bianca, maybe. Jade and Bianca possibly.
It's
Yeah.
SummerSlam weekend.
SmackDown. It's on SmackDown.
SummerSlam weekend.
Oh yes, on SmackDown. Okay, there's none of them. So let's just move on. No, I'm joking. I do want to talk about some of the interesting things that could be happening. SummerSlam is very well known, especially in recent years, for its surprises, people coming back, stuff like that. You might as well call it, Summer Surprise or Surprise Slam, whichever one you want to use. What surprises, Mex, what surprises are we realistically expecting to happen? I think one feels very obvious, but what surprises are we expecting to happen and see at SummerSlam?
I guess I'll go with the obvious, which I think Roman Reigns is probably set to return. Yeah, one's up for the bloodline, the real bloodline. Yeah, I think we've seen an incredible rise of this rogue bloodline, which I know not a lot of people were buying into at first. Solo's really turned the corner as like the top guy there. It feels like, I know this, I think it was maybe a couple months ago, 2 months ago, the Dirt Sheets were doing their thing and said that the main event of SummerSlam was going to be Cody versus Solo, and people were like, Solo's not ready and this, that, and the other. I don't even know what they meant at that time, because I don't think Solo's in-ring has ever been in doubt, sort of thing. No. I think at this point, especially after the year we've had, I would quite confidently say Solo's a better wrestler than Jey and Jimmy Uso in terms of what he does in-ring, for me, to my taste anyway. Yeah, so people weren't happy then. I guess the character stuff, to be fair, wasn't there at the time. In the last 2 months, he's really came along. Feels like, this rogue leader. Jacob Fatu has helped massively in, turning around the fortune of that group as well. And every week, the promos, the backstage ones they're doing now, which are kind of cool. They're saying Roman's done. Roman's not coming back. If he comes back, he knows what he has to do. He has to acknowledge me as a tribal chief. I'm doing what Roman couldn't do. I'm fixing Roman's issue, blah, blah, blah. They're laying the table for that return of Roman Reigns. He has turned Roman Reigns into a massive babyface without Roman Reigns showing up since WrestleMania. Right. And that's a job well done. Like him alone and doing that. That's a job well done. Obviously, they done what they done to Heyman, so I expect it to be Heyman and Roman turning up. And I've kind of thought in my head, how do we? That has to be the thing that costs Solo in this regard. I don't think Solo should just lose straight up to Cody, because I mean, he can, because Cody's obviously the WWE champion, but at the same time, for the work you've put into Solo, I think like you kind of need to protect him, sort of thing. So I'm thinking maybe Roman returns and takes out Cody, because that will get Cody to retain the title as a disqualification, keep their beef alive, and it doesn't turn Roman like completely to a babyface sort of thing. Still protects him, and then it protects Solo. And I know you maybe don't want to do that in a main event, kind of have a kind of finish like that, but yeah, I think that's probably what a lot of this SummerSlam hinges on. The return of Roman is what people are waiting for at this point.
And to be honest, in terms of that finish, I don't think people will care, just as long as Roman returns. I don't think they'll care that it's not a clean finish or whatever it is. It's just the Roman return is more important, I think, than the way it finishes.
Let me ask you this then. How does Cody Rhodes live in a universe as WWE champion when there is potentially a bigger star now in Roman Reigns on the same show, back in the same vicinity, in the same story? How do they maneuver that?
Gerard?
Well, the answer is he doesn't. I think we're living in a world. I think the real surprise Saturday night is Solo Sikoa as the new WWE champion. Let me explain why.
Not impossible.
This is not impossible at all.
Not impossible.
For Roman to come back, he has to come back with the bloodline at top form. They have to be able to show that, you know, as some people call them, we're not the Timu bloodline, right? Like we are the main bloodline. So this whole weekend is bloodline connected. Think about it. Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga getting a tag team title shot on Friday night, the night before. So I easily think they're winning the tag titles because Jacob Fatu is not losing at this point. I will go so far as to say if it were Tama Tonga and Tongaloa, then we'd probably see DIY retain. But
True.
Jacob Fatu is not losing. Not now. They're going to put a strap on him. So that's one part of this. Solo has to win the WWE title. And then after he wins is where Roman returns. I don't think Roman costs him. I think Roman returns, and that makes Solo's life problematic because for Solo, I can't even be WWE champion and tribal chief in peace because I finally did what you couldn't, and now you want to come back. So I think then where that puts Cody is this. Cody became, first of all, Cody being the top star is not going to change whether he's champion or not. He is the top star. He doesn't need the title for that. His title run hasn't been like the title run that people would go, oh my God, it's dominant. Oh my God, it's incredible. There have been some good matches, but we honestly don't see Cody any different now than we did before he was champion, except for him having the title. Cody's still going to be the one that stays the latest. He's still going to get all the requests. He's still going to sign, you know, the autographs and do the media appearances and things like that. All that's still going to happen. But Cody chasing the title has been far more rewarding for people than Cody holding the title. So let's put him back in chase mode. But I think really the story of the bloodline needs Solo Sikoa winning the WWE championship at SummerSlam. And I think that's what's going to happen.
I find it interesting. That Tongaloa is not being placed with Tama Tonga in this tag team match. I find it interesting. I know why. It just hasn't worked for him. It just hasn't. But there is as much as the bloodline with all those titles would make a lot of sense and kind of like, you know, confirm them as, you know, the top faction and dominant and all the rest of it. There's still a scenario that could happen on Friday that could have its bearing on SummerSlam as well. I've heard the talk of the possibility of Jimmy Uso making a return and costing them those titles so they don't win. That then setting up, you know, and, you know, giving us more excitement and the possibility of Roman returning at SummerSlam. I think it's very interesting to think or to envision Solo Sikoa as the champion. It would kind of almost feel bad for Cody, but in terms of the bigger picture and the storyline, it would make a hell of a lot of sense. There are so many ways this can go and can work. So many ways, even in the sense where however Roman returns could cost Cody, because it then keeps the Cody Roman feud kind of going as well. And of course, just him returning, and with all the things that Solo has said over the last few weeks, we still have that regardless of how it plays out. So there are so many ways this can work and still have all the rivalries and everything intact. So I don't think it matters who's holding the championship, but I think it will just add even more surprise if Solo as the champion. Like, as much as Mick said, people have been arguing whether he's ready or not. To me, it doesn't feel correct for him to hold the championship. But again, given the storyline, given the fact that Roman's coming back, given all the things that he's been saying over the last few weeks and the dominance, it makes sense in that regard. So, yeah, it's interesting.
I think it's very believable that he can walk out there as the WWE champion. Like, I don't think anyone should be shocked if it happens. Right. Ultimately, they've been telling a story on TV where the Bloodline have taken out Randy Orton. The Bloodline have taken out Kevin Owens. Right. All of Cody's allies have been dealt with and taken out. So, you know, and the Bloodline are still here at large. Like all it takes is one ref bump, and Jacob Fatu could be here moonsaulting people, and you know, it's
It'll be a
crazy.
wrap.
Like that's all it takes, really.
Right.
Like, and yeah, some people would be like, "Oh, typical bloodline, how bloodline matches finish." All right, that's fine. Like, it's absolutely fine. So Solo could walk out, and that will be a massive shock to end the pay-per-view, I think, because people are expecting Roman to return, all right, but if it's under the whole fact of Solo's now champion and Roman returns, that's one thing. Imagine Solo wins the title, Roman returns and acknowledges Solo. Like, after all, Roman called this guy the prince. You're next up.
He did.
He said, "Look, my premonition came true." He lifts his arm and anoints him like, "You're the guy." Like, you done it. The world's head will be spun. Like, no one will know what to do with themselves. Like, and this is the, you know, it might not be as drastic as that, but this is the way they've been booking shows. Like, no one should be surprised or angry if Cody Rhodes does not walk out of that stadium with the title this weekend.
And I, you know, even when I said, you know, Roman would come in and actually cost Cody the title, it could be a scenario whether it plays out on the same night or the next time we see them on SmackDown or whatever else, is that Roman takes out Cody, Solo wins, and then he does raise his hand and all the rest of it, maybe takes him out straight after, or have a promo on SmackDown and then do something to him. You know what I mean? To kind of bamboozle the rest of the bloodline as well. Like, that wouldn't feel far-fetched either.
Yeah. I think we noticed over the last few pay-per-views they've done, there has been some level of something massive happens on the next show. Like, every show has seemingly had a bit of a Raw after Mania feel. So whatever they do, there's going to be something that happens big on SmackDown next week. The same with Raw. That, you know, and I'm only following the pattern that's been emerging this past year. So yeah, we're in for something with this title and this story.
Yeah. It almost feels, because even with what happened on Raw yesterday, I don't know what it was. Something was missing. It just didn't feel like the best go home show for SummerSlam. But what I've noticed is it's the episodes after the PLE that have felt big.
Yes,
that always seemed to happen this year. Even since, especially since WrestleMania. It's always the shows after. The ones just before, kind of, you can argue and whatnot. But again, you know, it's even when we mentioned, you know, the fact that Jade and Bianca are having their match on SmackDown. They're now seeming to do this thing where it's a whole weekend. We know next year SummerSlam is going to be a 2-night thing as well. They're turning this whole thing into a whole weekend. We're seeing WWE Access and shows of the like, you know what I mean, the day before and all that kind of thing, or the morning of, and you know what I mean, all that kind of thing. So they're making everything a weekend and whatnot. So the Raw afterwards and the SmackDown afterwards, it's a big thing. So there's so many possibilities that could happen with this story, and I think it's a testament to how they are positioning themselves in just how we are now talking about so many different scenarios that still work regardless of what happens. It still gives us the end goal and all the rest of it that we want to see or that we're expecting to see. So, you know, it's going to be very, very interesting. One last thing to talk about. Oh, go
just
for
to
it.
add quickly, there's the Hikuleo thing. Hikuleo has signed in WWE in the last week.
Right.
So, that's another wrinkle.
And The Rock has finished filming his film.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that as well.
So we got all kinds of possibilities for SummerSlam.
There's a lot of options.
And even from when Jacob Fatu turned up, I'm just waiting for him to go with Roman.
Wow.
His family. I'm envisioning the whole, when we get to Survivor Series or whatever it is, War Games, whatever. I'm seeing family versus Solo and this new bloodline, because Hikuleo's family to Tonga Loa and Tama Tonga. So it doesn't. It wouldn't make sense to have, you know, half of you know, the Fatus and Anoa'is together with Hikuleo, and then yeah, it makes more sense for it to
Yeah,
be family versus the Tongans and Solo with The Rock. Anyway, yeah, it's a whole madness. We could do a whole show on it. It's a whole madness. The last thing I want to talk about real quickly, we saw Scorpio Sky has been kind of in and out of AEW for the last year or 2 years. Recently had an interview with the GOAT that is Chris Van Vliet. There are some very interesting things Scorpio Sky mentioned. The reason why he's been away, some of the other things he's been doing in between time, how he wants to present himself when he does come back. Mex, what are some just maybe a couple of things, maybe one thing that stood out for you in terms of this interview with Scorpio Sky?
He spoke highly of Ethan Page. He spoke very highly of Ethan Page, his work that he'd done, what are they called, Man of the Year with Ethan Page. And, you know, just basically how much of a good signing he is for NXT. Mentioned some of the work he got to do with him and how he wished, like, when he was TNT champion at the time with him, he wished that lasted for longer. You know, talked about things where I guess arguably he said that when AEW dropped the ball with the tag team championship with SCU as the first tag team champions, where he didn't really follow through and didn't do stuff. He mentioned obviously right now he's fit, he's happy to wrestle, he feels great. Obviously for those that are watching Collision, you would have seen a vignette of him aired maybe about a month to 6 weeks ago now, if not longer than that. And he was asked, okay, like, so what since then? When are we seeing this character? He said he doesn't know. He said it's like he's put it out there. He knows what the character should be, what he wants it to be. He's ready to go. Just they haven't put him on TV or anything since then. So he came across very upbeat, happy, loving life right now. But I guess as a professional wrestler, you want to be on TV, you want to be wrestling these matches. He spoke about, which I acknowledge as well, he was very adaptable. Anywhere they've put him, he's managed to adapt, whether it's heel or face or whatever kind of character they need him to portray. He's happy to kind of do that. Spoke well of Jericho. Obviously, he was the first person to pin Jericho when Jericho was world champion, although it wasn't for the title. Obviously, Jericho didn't need to kind of put him over, but you know, at the time they felt there was a lot of stock in Scorpio Sky. But seemingly, you know, just from what he was saying and obviously watching AEW every week, he's kind of obviously fallen down the pecking order. They look like they wanted to do something with him with his new vignette and character, but clearly haven't committed to it right now. And yeah, he was just kind of asked about how he just sees things going and what he wants to do. Like I said, he sounds very upbeat, but things aren't in his hand. He needs to be given the opportunity, which he's obviously working for someone, so he's not going to, I guess, come out and kind of badmouth them and that. He was very diplomatic in that respect. But yeah, from what he's saying, he's fit, he's raring to go, new character, new everything ready. They just need to give him the ball.
You know, he very much seems as though he is a very genuine, nice guy. It reminds me very much so of the Shelton Benjamin interview, where where Shelton himself said maybe the reason why he didn't achieve certain things or higher up the ladder or whatever else is maybe because he is a nice guy. We've seen so many times. And, you know, I've been falsely excited on way too many occasions when it comes to Scorpio Sky, where, you know, he's been away for a while, whether it be injury, just not being used, come back. He's done something of some kind of, you know, to get us excited, whether it be beating a Jericho, whether it be facing Cody Rhodes for TNT Championship, whether it be winning the TNT Championship for the second time. And how that went was the weirdest thing in terms of the TNT Championship in the whole iteration of this TNT Championship. This vignette where he's done a thing and then we've not seen him. I'm sure there was something similar on ROH at one point as well. not too long ago, something very similar where he's either had a backstage interview or a vignette on ROH. Again, didn't show up, didn't turn up. And he himself mentioned, you know, kind of his career feeling, especially in AEW, kind of feeling like a Ferris wheel type of scenario where at one point you're at the top, you know you're going to go back down and have to wait your turn in order to rise back to the top. Gerard, do you feel as though there is a problem with Scorpio Sky or a problem with AEW as to why it hasn't been consistent for him?
It's interesting. I definitely feel like this is a case, again, where you have a lot of people all looking for the same platform, yet the platform and the time on that platform is extremely limited. You know, you're talking about 2 hours of Collision, 2 hours of Dynamite, 1 hour of Rampage. So 5 hours of television. And then if you sprinkle in an hour or so of Ring of Honor, that's 6 hours, but you have so many people on the roster, so many stories to tell. I don't know why they've not committed more to Scorpio Sky. I thought him being, you know, the first tag team champion was definitely a win. He definitely, you know, was a great athlete for sure, whether we saw him win the brass ring or win the TNT championship or all of those things. Injuries being what they are, it's a little disheartening to hear that someone is very healthy but just not being used right now. That's kind of tough to hear. And it also makes you wonder, you know, why hasn't Scorpio Sky decided, you know what, let me try my talents elsewhere? You know, he proved before AEW that he was a strong talent and could accomplish this here in AEW. So it might just be time for him to consider where else he could go. Look at the success that Ethan Page has had. You know, sometimes you have to be willing to bet on yourself and say, this isn't working, let me try something else, instead of continuing to try to force a square peg in a round hole.
Very true. I mean, you know, he is at the tender age in wrestling terms, I guess, the tender age of 41 years old. It's only 2 years older than me, so it's not that old. Calm down. So, you know, do you think that goes against him, especially in this world that is, you know, he's a, let's be honest, he's a small fish in a big pond, as most people in AEW are, because there are so many people. You know, you mentioned so many different shows, but unlike the WWE at the moment, you know, you've got certain people who are only on certain shows, whereas with AEW, anyone can be anywhere, and we see some people kind of being on every show every week and all that kind of stuff. Do you feel that his age goes against him? Is it too late? He mentioned, you know, wanting to go back to the indies as well. Is that his better option? Should he just leave, or does he kind of just hold on?
It depends on what you want to do. Like, if you're interested in just getting paid, I mean, you're getting paid, or at least I assume you are. You know, if you're interested in actually applying your craft, then you need to go somewhere that will allow you to do it. You know, the talk of ageism is unfortunate, because if you look in the WWE ranks, a number of their stars are 40 and up. And then if you look at even AEW, from a Chris Jericho to Christian to, you know, even Adam Copeland, you've got several people that are over 40. Same in TNA. I don't think that being 40 and up is a death wish anymore, as long as you can still perform. And that's where I say this might be a time for him to really bet on himself. You know, whether it is make a go at it on the indies where you can still make a really significant living, or if you want to apply your craft at WWE. I think in an NXT world, there's definitely possibilities, considering that they need, you know, older talent to help really assist these brand new talents in the NIL program and in other spaces. So I definitely think there's use for him there. Or again, TNA, or, you know, if you want to go to New Japan or Pro Wrestling Noah, which tends to veer and skew towards an older audience there. I mean, there are plenty of options other than AEW. And, you know, even if he's locked into a heavy contract, if they're not using him, I'd ask for my release.
Mex, you know, I mentioned already, he seems to be the nice guy. Do you think that may be hindering him from making a decision to completely leave? And is it even realistic that an NXT, WWE, or even TNA would actually approach Scorpio Sky and ask him to join them?
I think they would approach him, but it's for what role? And that's probably the key thing. I think a lot. Well, I'll put it like this: we watched a Shelton Benjamin, Chris Van Vliet interview, and then a matter of days afterwards, the news about Bobby Lashley and MVP came out. So whenever that was filmed, the interview with Shelton, something that was quite alarming to me was when he was asked, "Would you return to WWE?" He said yes. And I thought, now I understand where you are in your career, and I understand obviously getting a paycheck, regular pay, and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, and maybe this is a bit harsh, but I think these are the kind of things that stop people maybe achieving the greatness, because it's like you've now been pushed into the big bad world sort of thing, but it's like if the safety blanket comes back, you're ready to kind of go back there. And with Scorpio Sky, I think we've seen, people that have had not been on AEW for such a long period kick up a fuss because then they don't believe their character is being portrayed in the right way, or the likes of his partner Ethan Page. Right, I've got a 3-year contract here. 3 years is up. I'm not really seeing, the benefit of being here. And I can go somewhere else and do that, kind of get a more enhanced role. And he's bet on himself, like we're saying. And nothing against Scorpio Sky or like Shelton Benjamin, but maybe it is this nice guy thing. They're not necessarily coming across as people that are gonna cause some unrest in the establishment or bet on themselves and stuff like that. And yeah, the paycheck is important. I'm definitely someone that likes playing it safe when it comes to that side of things, so I can't be here kind of lambasting them. But at the same time, they're in a world now where it's like, I am an established wrestler. I can go in and, like he said, I can be at the top of the card guy. I can be the first guy out there and set the crowd alight for the rest of the night. I can be babyface. I can be a heel. Like, he has no reason to be sitting at AEW as if he wouldn't get employed elsewhere. Yeah, maybe that was a very long way of saying that, exactly that. Like, he just needs to kind of bet on himself in this instance. There's a conversation right now online about Daniel Garcia. Daniel Garcia's contract's coming up. He hasn't re-signed one just yet. And should he stay? Like, Daniel Garcia is someone that I think we can see that AEW clearly like, but because of the influx of top talent, he is stop and start push. It's stop and start push.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I would actually, against everything I've always said about the young talents in AEW, I would say he should stay there and at least sign, say, a 2-year contract, one, if that's allowed, and basically say, I'm giving you guys 2 years to sort this out. Because they clearly have some stock in him, but bringing guys through, he keeps getting in the way of it. So I think someone like Scorpio Sky, so many people have come in, taken these positions, evolved, and they're clearly doing so much more with other people. I definitely think his time is up and he should look to move on to pastures new and go through the grind if that's what it is, because he does have a lot more to give. I just don't think it's on AEW TV.
Interesting. Gerard, any final thoughts on Scorpio's position and maybe what he should do?
Yeah, I think he should bet on himself. I really do. I mean, I think after a while you start to see, that quite frankly, it feels as though he was valued most when they started the company. And he has not been viewed in that same way since winning the tag titles back in 2019. And that's unfortunate. That's 5 years at this point, which is plenty of time through the pandemic, all of the things, to expect people to treat you differently after they've shown you how they've been treating you for the last 5 years doesn't put the onus on them. It puts the onus on you. And so I hope for him, he'll be able to look back and see, okay, I'm one of the foundational pillars of the company. They never called him a pillar. Ooh, this sounds harsh. This sounds harsh.
Go.
But is it possible, Scorpio Sky, that you were used as a tool of diversity to be able to say, hey, you know what? We like black people because, hey, our first tag champion was black. They didn't do anything with him since then. They didn't even make a member. It's the answer to a trivia question. And I think, again, at some point, you have to look at yourself and say, how are they treating me? And if they're not treating me in the way I believe I should be treated, you know, then you have to make a move. You can't keep Jay did it. Ethan Page did it. Sean Spears did it, you know, and look at all of these people and where they are right now. Jay just did her first tour of Tokyo, you know. Sean Spears was just in the main event of NXT a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Ethan Page is the NXT champion. Like, how many more elements of proof do you need that you can be mistreated in one place and be treated extremely well in another place by just being yourself? But you've got to make the move.
And that's very true because, sorry, Rex, I was going to say that's very true because Ethan Page isn't a different character. Sean Spears is no different. No different character either.
It's no different.
Jade is clearly no different character as well. We can even talk about Cody Rhodes. Of course, Cody Rhodes had established himself way before that, but then, you know, he's coming into WWE, the same character as he was in AEW. So yeah, it's interesting. Mex, what were you going to say?
Just to add to that list, Lexus King changed his name and that, but he's on TV every week.
Right.
What I was going to say is he also said in the interview the story of obviously AEW coming together, and he mentioned obviously he was in Ring of Honor, the Bucks, Cody, all of these people had Ring of Honor contracts as well. He knew when they were all leaving because their contracts were all up at the same time, including Scorpio Sky, SCU. He said all of these guys, these top guys and used guys was up. And he obviously from original All In, he heard of the bubble of what Tony Khan was planning and stuff like that. He said his first initial thought was that, all right, the Bucks are leaving, Cody leaving, all these kind of top, more used guys are leaving. Obviously, at the time he was in the tag team. This is going to create some space at the top of the card of Ring of Honor. Obviously, not knowing what would then happen with Ring of Honor before it was then rescued by Tony Khan. But this was, you know, going to create some space for these guys not re-signing. But then he had thought, obviously, this could be his time to be a top guy in Ring of Honor sort of thing. But then again, Tony Khan called, guaranteed money. I want you to sign for AEW, blah, blah, blah. And that's where he went. So potentially a missed opportunity. Like I said, granted, we know what happened to Ring of Honor, but even like the likes of Gresham took his chance when that happened. You see what I mean? So you have to look at the character as well. And it's like, is what you're saying matching with how you're acting? I want to see him do better. We were here doing Scorpio Sky daily every week when he wasn't winning that TNT championship. We wanted it at the time, and now it's just like interest levels are so low. It is to a point of leave, go and build up your name elsewhere. And it's not to say you might come back around to AEW and do something eventually, you know, when you've raised your stock. But right now the stock is low. Yeah.
You know, the points that Gerard was making about it, you know, the whole diversity question, even when listening to you know, to the interview, or even just seeing Scorpio Sky show up on my Instagram after however long, you know, for a moment I did think like, you know, he's not being used because we've now got a Swerve Strickland. Like, it went through my head. I didn't rest on it, but after what George just said, I'm like, it's a strong possibility. It's a very strong possibility because he was literally the only one at the time.
We found a better one.
Right. And it's not necessarily, an all-out racism thing. It's more so they don't know what to do with our people because they are not our people, or the people making decisions are not our people. So when there is a one who is better than the previous one, you know, these things are not bound to happen, but you can't be surprised when it does happen. You know what I mean? And I think here it is time for him to kind of bet on himself, whether that be trying to get to NXT and join it with Ethan Page, or you know, trying to establish himself again on the indies. I mean, he even mentioned that Cody Rhodes messages him all the time and all the rest of it. Text Cody Rhodes and say, mate, what have you got for me? Because I'm done here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Do the Ricky Starks thing and be like, you know what? Forget this. I'll wait till my contract's done. Cody, I'm gonna come join you. Just let me know when you're ready. Like, you know what I mean? It's possible. I think he does kind of need to just bet on himself, and I think Gerard is so correct when he says, you know, that you get to a point where it's not the company's issue, but the individual's issue. If you're holding on to something where nothing's changed for 5 years, it's a case of, you know, almost, you know, version on the brink of insanity, expecting something different when you're doing the same thing, or a really bad relationship where you've been mistreated, but for whatever reason you want to stay. It's crazy. It's crazy. But I'm hoping, I still have this small hope, Scorpio Sky being something in the next few years. I just think there was so much he could have done, but it's very unfortunate that it just hasn't happened. And it's very hard to see a way where a scenario or a place where it actually does, where I feel as though it's almost guaranteed that he's gonna, you know what I mean, become the star, I guess, that he probably should be. But it's going to be a very, very difficult slug for him to get there. On that very sad note, this is the end of our show. Our time is up. Hopefully Scorpio Sky's time isn't up, but our time is on today's show. You have been watching WrestlXtra on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get to see us every single week on a Tuesday, 6 p.m. UK time. Work it out in the US. It's difficult. Ask Google. You can also make sure you like and subscribe to see when this guy Mex puts out all of his reactions to AEW, WWE, everything else in between. You can also find Mex on the Wrestling's YouTube channel as well, with the Mandem every single week when they put out their show, as well as the extra content, including Wrestling's House. Again, if you still haven't watched a single episode of the new season, you're missing out. You're missing out. Go and check that out. You can find Mex on Instagram, WrestleManiac.uk, and on X, WrestleManiac UK. You can find the omnipresent man. Just say his name and he will appear. But you can also find him on all things Bonafide on socials. You can find him on the Faction Show, his own show, as well as WWT Live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday over on Women's Wrestling Talk. You can also find the omnipresent man doing all of his broadcasting and commentating for IWE, All Caribbean Wrestling, O'Shea, Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, Southern Honor Wrestling, and wherever else he decides to tell up. Just anywhere. You can find me, A-Dazzle, in the main place, which is WrestleManiac. What? Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram, BWA Dazzle on X. Guys, thank you for joining us for a longer show than usual, but it's been great, and we will see you again next time.